The house felt unusually still that evening, the kind of silence that presses against the ears and makes every small sound feel louder than it should. And Laura Miller noticed it the moment she stepped inside after work. Snow fell outside the windows of their suburban Ohio home, soft and steady, covering the street in white and making the world feel paused. Laura set her bag down and took a slow breath, already tired. Already carrying the quiet weight she had been holding for months. Her marriage to David had once been full of warmth and shared dreams, but lately it felt like they were living beside each other rather than together. David worked late, traveled often, and when he was home, his mind seemed elsewhere. Laura tried. Not to complain, tried to be patient, telling herself that love went through seasons. But some nights the loneliness felt heavier than she wanted to admit. Adding to that quiet tension was Ethan, David's son from his first marriage, who had moved in full-time the year before. Ethan was 20 now, tall, thoughtful, and polite, in a distant way that made Laura unsure of her place around him. She had never tried to replace his mother, never wanted to cross that line. But the careful space between them sometimes made the house feel colder. That night, David was away on another business trip, and Laura had expected the house to be empty, giving her space to unwind. But Ethan had returned from college without much notice, his car parked outside when she arrived. She told herself not to overthink it, reminding herself that this was his home too. Yet her chest tightened with the familiar mix of concern and uncertainty. She moved through the kitchen, turning on a lamp, when something caught her eye on the table. A single envelope lay near the edge, clean and simple, with her name written across the front in neat handwriting. Laura stopped walking. Her heart picked up speed, not with excitement, but with confusion. She didn't receive letters, especially not handwritten ones, and certainly not from someone inside the house. For a moment, she wondered if it was a mistake, if it was meant for David, but her name was clear. She sat down slowly, her fingers resting on the envelope without opening it, her thoughts racing. She tried to guess what it could be about, running through every possible reason Ethan might leave her a note, and none of them felt obvious. She worried it might be something uncomfortable, maybe a request to move out sooner than planned, or a complaint she hadn't seen coming. Laura had always been careful around Ethan, choosing her words, keeping her distance, afraid of causing tension or saying the wrong thing. She had sensed his watchful silence, the way he seemed to notice everything without reacting, and it had made her feel exposed at times, like her private struggles were visible even when she tried to hide them. She picked up the envelope, feeling its light weight, and stood by the counter, staring at it while the house remained quiet. Outside, a car passed, tires hissing on snow, and somewhere upstairs she heard a faint movement, reminding her she wasn't alone. Laura thought about how different her life looked from the outside. Stable home, a husband, a grown stepson, and yet inside she felt uncertain, standing in a place that didn't always feel secure. She slipped a finger under the edge of the envelope, then stopped, her hand hovering as doubt crept in. Part of her feared opening it, feared learning something that might confirm the worries she had been pushing aside for months. She leaned against the counter, gathering herself, thinking about the path that had brought her here, about marrying David with hope and belief, about stepping into a family that already had a history she couldn't change. She had tried to be kind, to be steady, to be understanding, even when she felt unseen. The letter felt like a turning point, though she couldn't explain why. And the quiet of the house made that feeling stronger. Upstairs, a door opened and closed softly, and Laura knew Ethan was there, aware she had arrived, aware of the envelope on the table. That knowledge made her pulse quicken, as if something unspoken was already hanging in the air between them. She realized that whatever was written inside, it wouldn't be something small or careless, because Ethan wasn't careless, and he didn't speak without reason. Laura finally pulled the envelope closer, her fingers tightening slightly, and in that moment, before she even unfolded the paper, she sensed that the fragile balance of her life was about to shift. Not in a loud or dramatic way, but quietly. through words she had never imagined her stepson would choose to share. Asterisk. Laura sat at the kitchen table with the envelope in her hands, the paper cool and thin, and after one last breath she opened it, unfolding the letter carefully as if it might break. The words were written neatly, steady and clear, and from the first line she felt a tight pull in her chest. Ethan did not write casually or carelessly. Every sentence felt chosen, as if he had thought about it for a long time before putting pen to paper. He began by saying he wasn't good at talking face to face and didn't want his words to come out wrong, so he chose to write instead. And that simple honesty caught Laura off guard. As she read on, he spoke about the house and how quiet it had felt lately. How he noticed the way Laura moved through rooms with patience and effort, always trying to keep things smooth even when the air felt heavy. He admitted that when he first moved in full-time, he kept his distance on purpose. Not because he disliked her, but because he didn't know where he fit anymore. And he didn't want to feel like he was taking something that didn't belong to him. Laura swallowed hard, her eyes moving quickly across the page, her heart racing as she realized how much he had been seeing while saying so little. Ethan wrote about watching his father work long hours and come home tired, about the small signs of strain that most people ignored, and how it made him worry that the family he had finally felt stable in was slowly slipping apart. One line made Laura stop and press her hand to her mouth as tears filled her eyes, because Ethan wrote that she had never tried to replace his mother, and that mattered more to him than she could know. He thanked her for respecting that space, for being kind without forcing closeness, and for caring in quiet ways that often went unnoticed. Laura had never expected gratitude from him, never thought he even realized how carefully she walked that line, and the realization shook her deeply. As she continued reading, the letter shifted from reflection to concern. And Ethan explained that he had spoken to his father the night before, not in anger, but in worry. He told David that he felt the distance growing and that he didn't want to lose the sense of home they had built together. Laura's heart beat faster at that confession, her thoughts spinning as she imagined that conversation, wondering what had been said and how David had reacted. Ethan wrote that he didn't blame anyone and that he understood how life pulled people in different directions. But he believed that silence was doing more harm than honesty. He said he admired Laura for staying when things were hard and for loving his father even when it wasn't easy, and those words hit Laura with unexpected force. She had felt invisible for so long that being truly seen, especially by someone she had kept emotional distance from, felt overwhelming. Her hands trembled slightly as she finished the letter. The final lines asking for nothing in return, only understanding. Only a chance for things to be better if everyone chose to speak instead of pulling away. Laura lowered the paper slowly. Her vision blurred with tears. She didn't try to stop, because the letter had opened something inside her she hadn't allowed herself to feel. The house no longer felt silent in an empty way. It felt full, charged with meaning and unspoken emotion. She sat there for a moment, breathing through the rush in her chest, when she heard soft footsteps behind her. Ethan stood a few feet away, not close enough to intrude, his posture careful, his expression calm but uncertain. He didn't ask what she thought or demand a response. He simply said he wanted her to read it, and that was all, his voice quiet and respectful. Laura nodded, unable to speak yet, holding the letter like something fragile and important. As Ethan turned to leave, he paused and added that his father didn't know he had written to her, that their conversation had been about the family, not blame, and then he walked away without waiting. Laura remained at the table long after he was gone, staring at the words again, realizing that Ethan had done something she never expected. Not by crossing boundaries or creating discomfort, but by choosing honesty and care at a moment when she felt most alone, and in that realization, she felt both shaken and strangely hopeful, knowing that whatever came next, nothing would stay the same. The next morning passed in a blur for Laura, her thoughts still wrapped around the letter and the quiet courage behind it. And when the sound of a car pulling into the driveway broke the stillness, her heart jumped because she knew David was home earlier than planned. She watched from the hallway as he stepped inside, his coat still on, his face tired but focused. And before she could speak, he looked at her with an intensity she hadn't seen in months. He set his bag down slowly and said they needed to talk. His voice calm but heavy, and Laura felt a knot tighten in her chest as they sat on the couch, leaving space between them at first, like strangers unsure of where to begin. David didn't waste time with small talk. He admitted that the trip had given him too much time to think, especially after a late-night conversation with Ethan that he couldn't shake. He explained how Ethan had spoken honestly, not with blame, but with concern, telling him he felt the family slipping and that he missed the way the house used to feel. David's voice wavered as he said he hadn't realized how distant he had become or how much pressure he had put on Laura by shutting down instead of speaking. Laura listened quietly, her hands folded together, her emotions rising but controlled because, for the first time in a long while, David wasn't defending himself or rushing past the moment. He told her he felt like he was failing as a husband, that he had hidden behind work because it was easier than facing his fear of not being enough. And hearing that honesty cracked something open between them. Laura finally spoke, telling him how alone she had felt, how she tried to be patient while slowly losing her sense of partnership. And her words came out steady, not angry, because the space felt safe enough for truth. David nodded, accepting it, and said he was sorry for making her feel invisible, for assuming she would always understand without him explaining himself. The conversation moved quickly, not because they rushed, but because there was so much that needed to be said, and once the wall broke, the words followed naturally. David admitted that he had forgotten how much small moments mattered, how presence mattered more than promises. And Laura felt her chest ease as she realized he truly saw the damage now. When Ethan joined them later, called into the room by David, the air felt tense for a second, but it didn't last. David thanked his son openly for speaking up, for caring enough to say something difficult. And Ethan listened quietly, his expression serious but relieved. Laura watched them, understanding that this moment wasn't about dramatic change, but about acknowledgement, about choosing honesty over comfort. The three of them sat together and talked about practical things, about meals, schedules, and plans. But underneath those details was something deeper, a shared agreement that silence would no longer be their default. That evening, they ate dinner together, not in forced cheer, but in calm openness. And Laura noticed small changes, like David putting his phone away and Ethan staying at the table longer, listening instead of retreating. Afterward, Laura went to bed feeling emotionally drained, yet lighter than she had in months. But sleep didn't come easily because hope can feel just as heavy as disappointment. She lay awake thinking about how fragile change could be, how easy it was to fall back into old habits, and whether this new honesty would last beyond the moment. In the quiet darkness, she realized that healing wasn't a single conversation or apology, but a series of choices made again and again, and that truth unsettled and steadied her at the same time. When David finally joined her, he didn't say much, but he reached for her hand, holding it firmly, as if to reassure her without words, and Laura understood that this wasn't the end of their struggle. But it was the first real step forward they had taken together in a long time. Weeks passed, and the changes Laura had felt slowly began to settle into a rhythm, subtle at first but unmistakable. As David made real effort to be present, and Ethan continued to show maturity beyond what she had expected. And one evening, as she packed a small bag for a short trip to visit her sister, she felt a quiet shift in the energy of the house that made her pause. Ethan appeared in the hallway, calm and careful, holding a small envelope in his hands, and Laura instinctively knew it was meant for her. Though she hadn't expected anything further from him after the letter weeks ago. She took it from him, her fingers brushing briefly against his, and smiled softly, sensing the same careful respect he had shown before. Inside, she found a short note, simple yet profound, thanking her for staying and acknowledging that families didn't have to be perfect to be real. And the words hit her differently than the first letter because now she had lived the changes they described. She realized in that moment that the true impact of Ethan's courage had unfolded over time. Not through dramatic confrontation, but through steady honesty, care, and a willingness to speak when it mattered. Laura felt a swell of gratitude and admiration for him, recognizing that his actions had bridged gaps that she had feared were permanent. And she hugged him lightly, a gesture of warmth and acknowledgement, not confusion or hesitation, and Ethan returned it with quiet assurance, showing that the respect between them had grown into something steady and sincere. As she prepared to leave, David came into the room, and the way he looked at her was different, now focused, attentive, and present, a man fully engaged rather than distracted. And Laura felt relief, mixed with hope, because his effort wasn't performative. It had come from understanding and choice. Over the next few days, she noticed how small things continued to matter. David putting aside his phone to talk, Ethan offering quiet support around the house, and the laughter that had been absent for months returning naturally. Laura understood that the home they were rebuilding wasn't perfect, and it never would be, but it was real, full of honesty, care, and shared intention, and that reality felt stronger than any illusion of perfection. One evening, sitting by the window with a cup of tea, she reflected on the past weeks and realized what had truly shocked her, not just that Ethan had written the letters, but that his respect and honesty had created a space where love and understanding could grow again without forcing anyone to feel uncomfortable or overstepping boundaries. She understood that his actions had healed fractures quietly, without drama or manipulation, and she admired him not as a child or stepson, but as a thoughtful young man who had made choices that brought the family closer rather than driving it apart. Laura felt a calm satisfaction in the knowledge that boundaries were honored, feelings were respected, and that honesty had been stronger than silence. And for the first time in months, she felt hope, not as a fleeting feeling, but as something tangible she could hold on to. As the day of her trip approached, Ethan gave her one last nod, a simple gesture of connection, and David helped her with her bag, smiling in a way that felt genuine and grounded, not rushed or distracted. And Laura realized that the foundation of their family had shifted quietly but permanently toward understanding and trust. Driving away, she looked at the house behind her and felt a warmth in her chest that had been missing for far too long. A combination of gratitude, love, and cautious optimism, knowing that the family they were building didn't need to be flawless to be meaningful, and that the courage of one thoughtful young man had made all the difference. During the trip, she reflected on how fragile moments of honesty could ripple into lasting change, and how simple gestures of care, like letters or small conversations, could transform relationships in ways that nothing dramatic ever could. By the time she returned, she felt renewed, ready to face daily life with David and Ethan, not as a chore, but as something worth nurturing, with laughter, patience, and respect flowing more naturally than before. That evening, as they sat together in the living room, Laura realized she no longer felt the quiet distance that had haunted her for months. The house was alive with subtle warmth, mutual understanding, and steady affection. And she finally recognized that what shocked her fully was not a single event or word, but the way honesty, respect, and courage had rebuilt the family from the inside out, leaving her with a sense of peace, hope, and love that she had not thought possible just a short time ago. And as she went to bed that night, she felt a gentle certainty that this beginning, fragile and real, was stronger than any ending they had feared before.